Dylan. I hope you're doing well. We have been a little bit sick over here, so you might get some coughs or some wheezes. Example A. Or hear Hannah in the other room. But we're going for it. We're making a video. So yeah, you made a video about a letter from J.R.R. Tolkien. I think I would go with Tolkien. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious what Simon, is that the current Tolkien? I wonder how he pronounces it. I think that's J.R.R.'s grandson, who's now like somewhat in charge of some things of the literary estate, but most of it's owned by other entities now, I think. Anyway, I really was interested by that letter. That had some really interesting things. I was noticing how J.R.R.'s theology that he describes in that letter seems to show up pretty directly in The Lord of the Rings, talking about there's this evil that's out there toiling and like working to make bad things happen. But both in his story and in his theology, he seems to know that good will ultimately win out and that evil's toiling is in vain, and that's all pretty interesting. He doesn't seem to include much in the way of like fatherhood and like father-son relationships in The Lord of the Rings, at least in my recollection. And I was wondering why that might be and if that shows up elsewhere. Like, I haven't read many of the other things like Beren and Luthien and the Fall of Gondor and all these sort of less than mainline installations in the series. So maybe you could enlighten me on that, but it seems like that was an important part of his life, and I'd be curious to see what he has to say, like what insights and reflections he might have put into the fictional part of his writing. Yeah. I think my takeaway from that letter is just like, be prepared for suffering and loss. I think that's something J.R.R. definitely was. He was prepared. He like knew what suffering was like through his experience in the war. He was prepared to lose even his son, maybe, because he saw how fragile life can be and how impermanent these people in your lives are. And that's something I really want to do well, is to not be surprised or thrown off or just like totally ruined when something bad happens. I just want to have the state of mind that, yeah, life has been given to us and it's beautiful and it's a gift, but it's not something we can count on. Yeah. I was having this thought. I don't really have much experience with grief or mourning. So I feel like some of my takes on death are half-baked at best. And this is one of them. So tell me if I'm totally off base. But I was thinking that grief only happens when like you're grieving what you thought would be your future. The potential relationship you had expected to have. But that was never a part of reality. That was never ultimately going to happen. And so you're grieving something that didn't exist. I don't know. So it's all kind of in your head in a way. And that's something we have control over. Am I crazy? I don't know. Let me know. Anyway, I have what I'm calling a speech, because when I first encountered it, it was spoken by Carl Sagan. I think he was narrating a part of his book, and I thought, like, wow, that's a cool speech. I want to talk about that. But then I come to find out I think it's just an excerpt of a book. But I'm still going to call it a speech because I don't know. Doesn't matter. So this is something written by Carl Sagan, who you may know as like the astrophysicist, science educator, personality on TV. He hosted The Cosmos for a while, and I think often was able to intertwine thoughts of galaxies and universes with like what it means for us as humans and even our spirituality, and especially as you'll see in this excerpt, our culture. And so I think that was interesting. I'm not too familiar with Carl Sagan and what he did, what he was all about, but his writing here seemed pretty well stated and poignant, and I wanted to talk about it. So here we go. It says, I have a foreboding of an America in my children's or grandchildren's time, when the United States is a service and information economy, when nearly all the manufacturing industries have slipped away to other countries, when awesome technological powers are in the hands of a very few, and no one representing the public interest can even grasp the issues, when the people have lost the ability to set their own agendas or knowledgeably question those in authority, when clutching our crystals and nervously consulting our horoscopes, our critical faculties in decline, unable to distinguish between what feels good and what's true, we slide, almost without noticing, back into superstition and darkness. The dumbing down of America is most evident in the slow decay of substantive content in the enormously influential media. The 30-second sound bites, now down to 10 seconds or less, lowest common denominator programming, credulous presentations on pseudoscience and superstition, but especially a kind of celebration of ignorance. And that's from his book, The Demon-Haunted World, Science as a Candle in the Dark. And that touches on a lot of things that make me have similar foreboding feelings. And from my perspective, I can't help but associate it with Christian culture, because so often the sort of labels of like anti-intellectualism or like pseudo-archaeology and like, I don't know, flat earth, let's say, feels like it goes hand in hand with Christianity sometimes. And I'm like, where is this coming from? What makes us buy into superstition and like distrusting the intellectuals? And what about Christianity seems to go hand in hand with that? I think there's a lot of factors at play. I think for a long time Christianity was threatened by scientific progress in terms of like evolution. You know, that was always like an anti-Christian feeling or things like that. And someone smarter than me can theorize why Christians in particular have seemed to be against advancements. I'm sure like medical things in the past were like seen as anti-Christian. I think even lightning poles were like, you shouldn't interfere with God's plan of smiting people with lightning. You're trying to play God. But like, it's just a lightning pole. It's just like it's protecting your house. I don't know. So there's a lot of that, and I want to figure out how that impacts me subconsciously in the culture I'm coming from, and how that interacts with what I think of science and that kind of thing. I think recently there's been a lot of reasons that people have given up faith in institutions. Like when COVID happened, people were like, oh, the government, the like health organizations don't really know what's going on. We can't super trust them to tell us the truth and have things figured out. So I think that was a valid dismantling of trust in an institution. I think hugely similarly negative was when like the Catholic Church was exposed for all of its sexual scandal and abuse, and people lost faith in that institution, and people lose faith in the government like all the time. That's always happening. And where does that leave us? Do we need to have trust in these institutions? Can we trust the intellectuals, the doctors, the scientists out there? Like, what are we supposed to do? Do we just be like, all right, I mean, as long as I've got God, I'm doing okay. I can manage the rest. Yeah, I mean, that's true. But there is immense benefit to having a culture of scientists and researchers that are working on things and helping us figure out how to prevent the next COVID, or what to do with, let's say, the threats of fire in California. Like, we need people to be researching, but like, I don't know. So this is a little bit of help me out. What how do we approach this? Because yeah, I think there is definitely, like he says, a dumbing down of America, and absolutely a distracting of the America. I think a lot of things serve to keep our attention away from what we should be focusing on. TikTok is a huge one. But I was also talking to my friend Brendan yesterday, and he was saying that he thinks conspiracy theories are a conspiracy theory. And that blew my mind. Like, everyone's trying to throw out these juicy conspiracies to distract us from, I don't know what it would be, what the goal is, but maybe it's distracting us from the neighbors in our lives, our community, trying to get involved with helping the people who are insecure in food or housing, or even just their status as people who can be here. There's a lot of fear and scarcity mindset out there that we can be the light of God for. But if we're just sitting on our phones all day, then we're not actually being the salt and light that we're called to. I don't know, I'm getting a little bit rambly. But those are some of the thoughts that speech stirred up in me. And I was impressed by it because it's an engaging and well-written and thought-provoking piece of content. And that's kind of exactly what he is saying there's a lack of. There's like, all these things aren't as thought-provoking or thoughtful to begin with. And anyway, that's why I wanted to share that. And I am curious to see what you have to say about it. So yeah, okay. I'm done. Bye.